There is something different about you. Not different in the way people say to be polite. Not different in the way that gets dismissed in a crowd. Different in the way that cannot be explained by circumstance, cannot be measured by what you have achieved so far, and cannot be undone by how long you have been waiting. You carry something inside you that was placed there before you had a name for it, before you had words for it, before you even knew you were carrying it at all. And today, that something is being named. You are a chosen one. Not because life has been easy. Not because every door opened the first time you knocked. Not because people around you saw it and cheered you on. You are chosen precisely because you kept going when none of those things were true. You kept going when the silence was louder than any answer. You kept going when the people who doubted you grew comfortable in their doubt and started wearing it like certainty. You kept going, and that is not a small thing. That is the mark of someone who was built for something that ordinary seasons cannot contain. But here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. This message did not find you by accident. You did not scroll past it, stumble into it, or arrive here by chance. There is a thread, invisible but unbreakable, that pulled you to this exact moment. Heaven does not waste placement. And the fact that you are here, right now, listening to these words means something. It means your season has shifted, even if your circumstances have not caught up yet. It means the conversation has changed, even if your surroundings look the same. Something has already moved on your behalf, and you are only beginning to feel the edge of it. Now I want to speak to something specific, because I know who I am talking to. I know what the last season has felt like for you. And I want to name the signs, because if you are truly a chosen one, you will recognize at least 3 of these without even trying. The first sign is that your dreams have become sharper. Not louder, not more dramatic, but cleaner. There is a precision to what you see at night that was not there before. You wake up and the images stay with you longer than they used to. You cannot always explain what they mean, but something in you knows they are not random. They feel like rehearsal. The second sign is a frustration that has no clean explanation. Not frustration at a specific person, not frustration about a single event, but a deep, restless irritation at the gap between where you are and where you know you are supposed to be. People around you cannot understand it. You have tried to explain it and it comes out wrong, but it is real, and it is not a character flaw. It is the friction of a life pressing against the walls of a space it has outgrown. The third sign is that certain relationships have started to feel heavy in a way they never did before. People you have known for years suddenly feel distant, not because they changed, but because you have. You love them, but the frequency is different now. And that gap, that quiet widening, is not betrayal. It is separation for purpose. The fourth sign is that you keep encountering the same message from different directions. A conversation you overhear, a line in a book you picked up randomly, a verse that someone sends you without knowing why, a moment in silence where something settles on you and you cannot shake it off. The same word, the same theme, the same call, arriving from different sources. Heaven is not subtle when it is trying to reach you. It is persistent. And if the message keeps finding you, it is because you are meant to receive it. The fifth sign is that you have carried the weight of a vision you could not yet explain to anyone around you. You have seen it in your mind, felt it in your chest, known it in the quiet moments before sleep. You could not prove it to anyone. But you knew. You have always known. And that knowing, that quiet, unshakable knowing, is not arrogance, it is appointment. You are not here because you stumbled into faith. You are not here because someone guilted you into showing up. You are here because something in you has been leaning toward this moment for longer than you realize. You are an earth angel, a carrier of something this world needs and cannot generate on its own. You are part of a plan that was written before your parents had your name. And the plan has not been canceled. It has not been delayed beyond recovery. It has been building carefully and intentionally toward what is already beginning right now. The season of waiting has not paused. It has ended. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that no one talks about honestly. It is not the exhaustion of working too hard or staying up too late. It is the exhaustion of holding something inside you for so long that your arms have grown tired from the weight of carrying a promise that has not yet arrived. It is the tiredness of someone who has believed, genuinely believed, and then watched the clock move forward without the thing they were believing for. If you know that feeling, if you have sat with it in the quiet hours, if you have felt it press against your chest at 2 or 3 in the morning when the world was asleep and you were alone with it, then I want you to know something right now. I see you. I am not speaking to a general audience. I am speaking to you, specifically, by name, in the language of what you have lived. And I want to name 4 things that I believe you have been experiencing, not as a guess, but as a recognition. Because these are not random symptoms. These are the signs of someone standing at the edge of their own breakthrough, so close to the other side that the pressure has become almost unbearable. The first thing you have been experiencing is a wave of grief that arrives without warning and without a clear source. You will be going about your day, doing something ordinary, and suddenly something rises in you that feels like mourning. Not for a person, not for a specific loss, but for something that feels like time, like years. Like a version of your life that existed in possibility and has not yet materialized in reality. And because it comes without a clear reason, it is hard to explain to anyone around you. You do not know what to call it. You just know it comes, and it sits heavy, and then it lifts, and you go on. That grief is not a sign that something went wrong. That grief is the evidence that you were created for something specific enough that its absence leaves a mark. You do not grieve what you were never meant to have. You only grieve the real thing. The second thing is that places and people you have known for a long time have started to feel unfamiliar in a way that is almost disorienting. You walk into a room that used to feel like home and something is off, not because the room changed, but because you did. You sit across from someone you have shared years with, and the conversation that used to feel easy now requires effort you did not used to need. This is not ingratitude. This is not coldness. This is what happens when a person has been quietly growing in a direction that their environment has not kept pace with. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that you have become too large for a space that used to fit you perfectly. And that is not something to apologize for. That is something to pay attention to. The third thing is a dream, or a series of dreams, that keeps returning. It may not always be the same dream in its details, but there is a recurring image, a recurring feeling, a recurring theme. A door, a corridor, a threshold that you are standing at, but have not yet crossed. You arrive there in the night, and you wake up before you go through. Or you stand there looking at it, and something holds you back. Not fear exactly, but a sense that you are not yet supposed to move. That dream is not confusion. That dream is a rehearsal. Heaven rehearses its chosen ones for what is coming. The fact that you keep arriving at the same threshold in your sleep is because there is a real threshold in front of you in your waking life, and your spirit is being prepared to cross it without hesitation when the moment comes. The fourth thing is a message that keeps finding you from different directions at the same time. A verse that appears in your morning reading, and then a stranger mentions the same idea in a conversation, and then a song plays, and the lyric says the same thing in a different language. This is not coincidence. Heaven does not repeat itself out of habit. Heaven repeats itself because it is trying to make sure you hear something clearly before a door opens that requires you to walk through it without warning. When the same message keeps arriving from different sources, it is because you are being prepared for something that requires your full attention and your complete readiness. Now I want to speak to something else, because I know that the waiting has not only been confusing, it has been painful in ways you have not fully given yourself permission to name out loud. The mist of loneliness that comes not from being alone in a room, but from feeling unseen in a crowd. The quiet, persistent feeling that something is wrong with you, that the reason things have not moved is somehow a reflection of your worth, your faith, your effort. The sleeplessness comes when your mind will not stop running through the same questions about why and when and how much longer. The feeling of being misunderstood not by strangers, but by the people closest to you. The people who love you and still cannot quite see what you are carrying or why it matters so much. I am not going to rush past those things. They deserve to be named, not explained away. The loneliness was real. The self-doubt was real. The nights were real. And the courage it took to keep showing up, to keep believing, even when the belief felt hollow, to keep your face towards something you could not yet see. That courage was extraordinary. You may not have recognized it as courage because it did not feel brave. It felt like survival. But survival in the direction of your calling is one of the most profound forms of faith that exists. Now I want to offer you a reframe, not to minimize what you have been through, but to hand you a new lens for understanding it. There are two kinds of people who get overlooked. The first kind is genuinely overlooked, passed by, unseen, left behind. Their overlooking is the result of someone else's blindness or someone else's cruelty, and it is a loss, real and significant. But the second kind of person is not overlooked at all. They are positioned. They are placed in a particular location, at a particular time, in a particular condition, not because they were forgotten, but because the full assignment requires them to be exactly there until exactly the right moment. A seed buried in the ground looks identical to a seed that was simply dropped and left to die. From the outside, there is no visible difference. Both are in the dark. Both are surrounded by pressure. Both are hidden from the world above. But one is germinating. One is gathering everything it needs from the very environment that looks like its burial. And when it breaks through the surface, it does not break through slowly or apologetically. It breaks through with everything it accumulated in the dark. You have not been overlooked. You have been positioned. The darkness was not punishment. The waiting was not abandonment. The silence was not indifference. It was the specific condition required for what is inside you to develop without interference, without premature exposure, without the kind of pressure that breaks things that are not yet fully formed. You were being formed. You are still being formed, and the forming is nearly complete. There is a difference between a person who has been passed over and a person who has been protected long enough to arrive whole. You are the second kind. The people who doubted you, the doors that closed, the opportunities that seemed to evaporate, none of those things removed you from the plan. They refined you for it, every single one of them. And what you are about to walk into will require the version of you that only the waiting could have produced. The earlier version could not have held what is coming. The current version, the one that survived what you survived, the one that kept its faith through what you kept yours through, that version is ready. I want to ask you something personal. Think about the last season. Not the hardest part, but the quietest part. The part where nothing was happening and you had to decide, without any evidence, without any visible sign, whether you were still going to believe. And you did. Maybe barely, maybe by a thread, maybe with more doubt than faith on some mornings. But you did. You held on. And that decision, made in secret, made when no one was watching and nothing was rewarding you for it, that is the decision that will be honored openly in the season that is beginning right now. You are not in a waiting room. You have never been in a waiting room. You have been in a preparation chamber, and the preparation has served its purpose. What looked like delay was actually protection. What looked like silence was actually instruction. What looked like being forgotten was actually being kept. There is a profound difference between those things, and understanding that difference changes not just how you feel about your past, it changes how you walk into your future. The chosen ones do not enter their breakthrough stumbling. They enter it having been strengthened precisely by what looked like the obstacle. Every hard year added something to you. Every closed door taught you something about where you were not supposed to be. Every relationship that ended freed up space for the one that is supposed to stay. Every dream that did not happen in the timeline you planned became evidence that the real timeline is more strategic than your own. So today, right here in this moment, I want to invite you to do something. Not a large gesture, not a complicated ritual, just this. If you are sitting somewhere right now and you recognize yourself in these words, if you have lived through what I have described, and you feel that quiet, steady shift beginning in your spirit, I want you to type the words "I'm ready" in the comments below. Not because it signals anything to me, but because there is power in declaration. There is something that moves in the invisible realm when a chosen one names their readiness out loud or in text, which is just a written form of the spoken word. Type "I'm ready" if your spirit is saying yes to what you just heard. And while you are there, if this message has touched something real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear their name called today. Subscribe so that the next word that is meant for you does not pass you by. And if you feel moved to support this work so that it can reach more people like you, there is a way to do that in the link below. Every act of generosity from this community sends this message further into the world, and somewhere out there is another chosen one sitting alone tonight who needs to hear exactly what you just heard. You are not alone in this. All across the world right now, there are others who have carried the same quiet weight, who have had the same sharp dreams, who have felt the same restless press of a purpose that would not be silenced. And every single one of them arrived at their breakthrough the same way you are arriving at yours. Not by having everything go right, but by holding on long enough for the right moment to come to them. That you were positioned, and the position is exactly right. So now that you know what you have been carrying, and now that you have a new language for the season you have been living through, the question that naturally rises is this: what do I do with it? Not in a year from now, not when circumstances shift, not when someone gives you permission, or when the evidence finally lines up in a way that makes it easy to believe. But today, right now, in the actual life you are living, with the actual limitations in front of you, with the actual tiredness in your body and the actual uncertainty in your mind. What do you do today? This is the part where I do not want to give you something vague. I do not want to hand you a feeling and call it a practice. I want to give you something real, something with shape, and weight, and steps you can follow, even when your motivation is low, even when the morning feels heavy, even when the gap between where you are and where you are going feels wider than it did the day before. Because chosen ones are not sustained by inspiration alone. They are sustained by practice. They are sustained by the small, consistent, faithful acts that no one applauds and no one sees, but that build something invisible and indestructible in the spirit over time. I want to introduce you to something I call the three-step return. It is not complicated. It does not require a specific location or a particular mood. It does not require you to feel ready or feel faith or feel anything in particular before you begin. It only requires 3 minutes of your willingness and 7 minutes of your stillness. And I am going to walk you through it right now so that you can begin today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. The three-step return is a daily practice designed for people who are in the middle of their becoming, not people who have arrived, not people who have everything figured out, people who are still in the in-between, still in the corridor between the old season and the new one, still in the process of being assembled into the version of themselves that the calling requires. If that is you, and I believe it is, then this practice was made for you. Step 1 is called the gratitude inversion, and I know that word gratitude can sometimes feel like pressure, like one more thing you are supposed to feel that you do not always feel naturally. So I want to reframe it. This is not gratitude for what happened. This is gratitude for what did not happen. I want you to think back right now to something that you wanted desperately that did not come through, a relationship that did not work out, an opportunity that fell apart at the last moment, a door that closed in your face when you had been counting on it opening, a version of your future that you had built in your mind and then had to watch dissolve. I want you to bring that specific thing to your mind, and I want you to sit with this question. What did the absence of that thing protect me from? Not in a forced, performative way, but genuinely. What would my life look like right now if that had gone the way I wanted it to go? Where would I be? Who would I still be attached to? What would I still be carrying? What door would still be in front of me, blocking the real one? Because here is what I have seen over and over again in the lives of people who were being prepared for something significant. The things that felt like losses, the things that felt like rejections, the things that felt like failures. They were not interruptions to the plan. They were the plan. The closed door was not the obstacle. The closed door was the direction. And when you learn to look back at the things that did not work out and find the protection in them, you begin to develop a trust in the process that cannot be shaken by current circumstances, because you have evidence. You have a history of being redirected towards something better than what you were asking for. You just had to survive the redirection long enough to see it clearly. So step 1 is simple. Before you do anything else in the morning, or at whatever time you practice this, bring one specific thing to mind that you are grateful it did not happen, not a general feeling of gratitude. One specific thing, name it, hold it, and say out loud or in your heart something like this. I am grateful that door closed. I am grateful for what I was protected from. I trust that what is coming is better than what I lost. Give that 30 seconds. Give it 60 if you can. But do it specifically, not generally, and do it honestly. This is not positive thinking for its own sake. This is the act of building evidence-based trust in a wisdom greater than your own. Step 2 is what I call the declaration of positioning. And this is where the language we have already talked about becomes a tool rather than just a concept. You have heard the word kairos. You know now that there is a difference between clock time the kind that measures days and months and years and evaluates your progress against a human calendar and appointed time, the kind that moves according to a divine sequence that does not answer to the clock. In step 2, you are going to speak to your own timeline in the language of appointed time, not in the language of delay, not in the language of shortage, not in the language of almost, or not yet, or maybe someday. Here is what the declaration sounds like. You do not have to use these exact words, but the meaning must be the same. You say something like this: I am not behind. I am positioned. My timeline is not broken. It is appointed. What is mine will not arrive too late. It will arrive at exactly the right moment for everything I have been prepared to receive. I do not operate on the world's schedule. I operate on a divine one. And that schedule is already in motion. Say that once. Say it with your whole chest if you can. Say it even if your feelings do not immediately agree with it. Say it especially if your feelings do not agree with it. Because the declaration is not a report on how you feel. It is a statement of what is true regardless of how you feel. And when you speak truth into your own atmosphere consistently, over days and weeks, something begins to shift. Not because the words are magic, because the words are alignment. You are aligning yourself with what is already true in the invisible realm, and that alignment creates the conditions for what is invisible to become visible. This declaration takes more than 30 seconds. You can say it in your car. You can say it before you get out of bed. You can say it in the shower. You can say it silently if you are in a public place. But say it every single day without missing a day for 30 days and watch what begins to change. Not just in your circumstances, in your posture, in your face, in the way you carry yourself when you walk into a room, in the way you respond to setbacks, in the way you recognize opportunities that before you would have talked yourself out of. The declaration is not just words. It is a daily act of repositioning your spirit. Step 3 is the 7 minutes of silence. And I know that for some of you, the idea of 7 minutes of silence sounds either too simple or too difficult. Too simple because you expected something more complex. Too difficult because your mind does not stop moving, and the idea of sitting in silence feels like an invitation for every anxious thought you have been avoiding to come flooding in at once. I understand both of those responses, and I want to speak to them directly. 7 minutes is not arbitrary. There is a specific reason that 7 minutes, practiced consistently, with the right kind of preparation, produces results that longer periods of forced meditation do not always produce. It is long enough for the nervous system to begin to settle. It is short enough that the mind does not rebel against the commitment. It is the precise window in which something in your brain, your actual physical brain, begins to shift from a reactive state into a receptive one, from beta, which is the frequency of stress and reaction and noise, into the lower, slower frequencies where clarity lives, where creativity lives, where the quiet voice of guidance can actually be heard above the noise of everything else. And here is what I want you to know about those 7 minutes. You do not have to do anything during them. You do not have to think correctly or feel peaceful or have a profound experience. You only have to be still. Sit or lie down somewhere comfortable. Close your eyes if that helps. Breathe naturally, and simply be present in your own body for 7 minutes. If thoughts come, let them come. Do not chase them and do not fight them. Just watch them pass like clouds and return your attention gently to your own breathing. That is all. That is the whole practice. But here is the part that matters. The 7 minutes works best when your nervous system has already been prepared by steps 1 and 2. When you have already activated gratitude in your body through the gratitude inversion. when you have already aligned your spirit through the declaration of positioning. By the time you arrive at the 7 minutes of silence, you are not arriving as someone trying to find peace. You are arriving as someone who has already begun to inhabit it. And in that state, the silence is not empty, it is full. It is the most productive 7 minutes of your day, not because of what you are doing during them, but because of what you are allowing to happen in you during them. Now I want to say one more thing about the practice before we move forward, because it is important, and I do not want you to miss it. The 3-step return is not a replacement for professional support if you need it. It is not a substitute for community or for the people in your life who love you. It is a personal practice, a daily act of spiritual maintenance that keeps you oriented toward your purpose, even on the days when everything around you is pulling you toward discouragement. It is the thing you do before the world gets its hands on your morning. It is the first conversation of your day with your own spirit, with your own calling, with the God who placed the assignment inside you before you were born. Do it every day. Do it even when it does not feel like it is working. Do it especially on the days when the gap feels widest and the waiting feels heaviest. Because consistency in the practice is what builds the kind of internal stability that cannot be shaken by external instability. And the chosen ones who walk into their breakthrough whole, who step through the open door without collapsing under the weight of it, who receive what is coming without being overwhelmed by it, they are the ones who kept practicing in the dark. They are the ones who kept showing up for steps 1 and 2 and 3 on the mornings when nothing felt like it was moving. They are the ones who, when the moment finally came, were ready not because they felt ready, but because they had been practicing readiness for so long that it had become their default. If that is the kind of chosen one you want to be, then begin today. Not Monday, not after the next hard thing passes today. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. 30 seconds of gratitude for what did not happen. 30 seconds of declaration for where you are positioned. 7 minutes of silence for what is being built in you right now. And when you have done it, type the words I receive in the comments. Not as a performance, but as a marker. A line in the sand that says, "This is the day I stopped waiting for the practice to feel perfect and started doing it anyway." And if someone in your life is in the middle of their own season of becoming, share this with them. The 3-step return works best when it is shared, when it becomes the practice of a community, not just an individual. Like this message if it gave you something real today. Subscribe so the next step in this journey finds you before you go looking for it. The practice is the bridge between where you are and where you are going, and the bridge is already under your feet. Now I want to stay with you in something that might surprise you, because what I am about to say is not what most people expect when a conversation turns towards science. Most people expect science and spirit to occupy separate rooms, to speak different languages, to arrive at different conclusions. But what the last 30 years of neuroscience research has quietly been uncovering is something that the ancient world already knew and expressed in different language. There is a frequency that certain people carry, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally, a measurable, documentable, reproducible frequency in the brain that distinguishes people who are operating at the level of their highest calling from people who are simply surviving their circumstances. And researchers, serious researchers working in serious institutions, have begun to call it by a name that you may have heard before, but perhaps never understood in the context of your own life. They call it gamma. Gamma is not a concept invented for this conversation. It is a real brainwave frequency, measured in hertz, documented in peer-reviewed research, and consistently associated with what scientists describe as peak cognitive performance, heightened awareness, deep creativity, rapid problem solving, and what some researchers have called moments of sudden insight, the kind of insight that feels like it arrived from somewhere outside you rather than something you reasoned your way into. In spiritual language, you might call those moments revelation. In scientific language, they call them gamma bursts. But the experience being described is the same. A sudden clarity that cuts through confusion. A knowing that arrives whole rather than being assembled piece by piece. A moment where everything that was scattered suddenly organizes itself into a pattern that makes complete sense. Here is what the research shows about who experiences gamma most consistently. It is not the people with the highest formal education. It is not the people with the most resources or the most advantages. The people who produce gamma with the most frequency and the most intensity are people who have developed what researchers describe as an integration of deep experience and present awareness. In other words, people who have been through something significant, who have been shaped by difficulty, who have been refined by seasons that required more of them than they felt they had, and who have learned to carry that depth into a state of present attentiveness. People like you, the chosen ones, carry a specific frequency, and now science has a name for it. But here is the part that changes everything. Gamma is not fixed. It is not something you either have or you do not have. It is something that can be activated. It is something that can be deliberately, intentionally, and consistently cultivated through specific sound-based protocols that have been developed and refined over decades of research. And a person who has done more work in this specific area than perhaps anyone else in the field is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years inside some of the most demanding research environments in the world. His training was grounded in the rigorous scientific tradition of MIT, where the standard for evidence is exceptionally high, and where the work is expected to produce results that hold up under sustained scrutiny. His subsequent research brought him into collaboration with teams connected to NASA, where the question being asked was not abstract or philosophical, but intensely practical. How do you optimize the human brain under conditions of extreme pressure? How do you help a person access their highest cognitive function, not occasionally, not randomly, not only in ideal circumstances, but consistently, reliably, on demand? The research that came out of those years of work, research that involved thousands of documented cases and ran for what amounted to more than 3,000 days of continuous study, produced a finding that Dr. Rivers describes as the most significant discovery of his career. The brain can be led, not forced, not manipulated, not overridden, led. The way a river can be led by the shape of the land it moves through without losing any of its essential nature, the human brain can be guided into specific states of frequency through the introduction of specific external sound patterns. This is not a new idea in principle. Monks have known for centuries that certain chants, certain rhythms, certain tonal patterns produce measurable shifts in awareness and cognition. What Dr. Rivers and his team contributed was the scientific precision to understand exactly why this happens, which frequencies are responsible for which states, how long the exposure needs to last to produce a reliable shift, and what combination of sound technologies produces the most efficient and most lasting results. The technology that emerged from this research uses three primary elements working together. The first is binaural beats, which are two slightly different tonal frequencies played simultaneously, one in each ear, that cause the brain to produce a third frequency equal to the mathematical difference between them. This third frequency is not in the audio. It is produced inside the brain itself. The brain essentially creates its own entrainment signal in response to what it is hearing. The second element is isochronic tones, which are evenly spaced pulses of sound that the brain synchronizes with in a different but complementary way, reinforcing the frequency shift that the binaural beats initiate. The third element is a precisely calculated layering of these two technologies with specific ambient sound frequencies that support the nervous system in releasing its habitual stress patterns, making it possible for the brain to enter the target frequency more quickly and more deeply than either technology could achieve alone. The target frequency is theta, which sits between 4 and 8 Hz and is associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, and the kind of relaxed open awareness in which new connections between ideas form with unusual ease. But the goal of the protocol is not to stop at theta. The goal is to use theta as the entry point, the preparation state, from which gamma then becomes accessible. Because gamma, at its highest intensity, does not tend to arrive in a brain that is stressed or reactive or fragmented. It arrives in a brain that has first settled, first opened, first released the noise of ordinary cognitive traffic. Theta is the stillness before the breakthrough. Gamma is the breakthrough itself, and the protocol that Dr. Rivers developed to move a person through both of these states, from their ordinary waking frequency down through theta and then up into gamma, takes exactly 7 minutes. You heard that correctly. 7 minutes, the same. 7 minutes I introduced to you in the 3-step return. That was not coincidence. That was preparation. The 7 minutes of silence I asked you to practice is the fertile ground in which what I am about to tell you takes root most effectively. Because a brain that has already been practicing stillness, that has already begun to release its grip on reactive thinking through a daily practice of intentional quiet, responds to the audio protocol faster, more deeply, and with more lasting effect than a brain encountering it cold. You have already been laying the foundation. What I am introducing now is what gets built on it. The product is called the Genius Wave. And before I tell you anything more about it, I want to tell you about 2 people whose stories stayed with me. The first is a woman who came to this program in a season that sounds, from the outside, like it should have been fine. She had a job, she had people around her, she was not in obvious crisis, but inside she was running on empty in a way she could not explain to anyone. A deep cognitive and creative depletion that made every task feel like moving through water. She had been in that state for so long that she had started to believe it was simply who she was now. She used the Genius Wave for the first time on a Tuesday evening. She described what happened in the 7 minutes as nothing dramatic, just a settling, a quieting, a sense of space opening up inside her head that she had not felt in years. The following morning she woke up and solved a problem she had been stuck on for 4 months. Not because she tried harder, because her brain had access to the frequency where the solution already existed. The second story comes from a man who had spent years feeling like his potential and his actual performance were living in entirely different universes. He could feel how much was inside him. He could not access it consistently. The gap between what he knew he was capable of and what he was actually producing in his daily life was a source of quiet grief that sat underneath everything. He started using the Genius Wave every morning before the day got its hands on him. Within 3 weeks, people around him began noticing changes he had not announced. His clarity in conversations, the quality of his ideas, the speed with which he moved through problems that used to stall him. He did not change his circumstances before his performance changed. His performance changed, and then his circumstances began to follow. I know that some of you are sitting with a very reasonable thought right now. $39 is not nothing, especially in a season where every dollar is carrying more weight than it used to. Especially when you have tried things before that promised more than they delivered. I want to acknowledge that thought without dismissing it, because it is a legitimate thought, and you deserve to have it honored. The hesitation you feel is not a character flaw. It is wisdom. It is the reasonable caution of someone who has invested hope before and experienced disappointment before. And that experience is real and it matters. But I also want to offer you this. The genius wave is not asking you to believe anything before you try it. It is not asking you to commit to a worldview or a practice or a lifestyle before you have evidence. It is offering you 90 days to find out for yourself what happens when your brain has consistent access to the frequency it was designed to operate at. 90 days during which, if you experience nothing that feels like value, you receive every dollar back. No argument, no complicated process. A complete refund, guaranteed for 90 days. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, it is available today for $39. That is the price of a meal you will forget in a week, applied instead to a tool that has the potential to change the quality of every day that follows. I am not asking you to decide based on my words. I am asking you to decide based on what your spirit already knows after everything you have heard today. And if your spirit is saying yes, then the link is there waiting for you in the pinned comment. One more thing I need to say clearly. There are imitation versions of this product circulating online, sold through unauthorized channels that are not the same program and carry none of the research, the precision, or the guarantee behind the real one. Please only access the Genius Wave through the single link in the pinned comment below. That is the only source I can stand behind, the only source that carries the 90-day guarantee, and the only source that delivers what Dr. Rivers actually developed. Do not risk your investment on a copy of something that was already precise enough to matter only in its original form. And because the discounted price of $39 is a time-limited offer tied to a specific inventory of access slots, I want to be direct with you about this. If you come back to this video tomorrow or next week and the price has returned to $49, or the link reflects a different availability, that is not a tactic. That is the reality of how the offer is structured. The window is real. And if today is the day your spirit said yes to this, then today is the day to act on that yes. You were led here. You were prepared here. And what is waiting for you through that link is one more piece of the preparation that was already underway before you arrived. Before we move forward, I want to pause here for a moment. Not to introduce something new, not to shift the tone or change the subject, but to sit with you in something that the last section may have stirred up without fully naming. Because there is a particular kind of person who hears about a tool, a practice, a protocol, a path forward, and feels something complicated rise up in response. Not resistance exactly, not cynicism. Something more nuanced than either of those. Something that sounds, if you listen closely enough, like a quiet voice saying, "But what about everything it already cost me to get here?" And that voice deserves an answer before we go any further. So let me speak to it directly. The waiting cost you something. I am not going to soften that or reframe it before I have fully named it, because you have heard enough messages that rushed past the wound to get to the promise, and I do not want to be another one of those. I want to sit in the actual weight of what was taken from you before I say a single word about what is coming. Because the coming things are real, and they are significant, and they deserve to land in a person who has been fully seen and fully acknowledged, not in a person who is still silently carrying grief that was never given permission to be spoken. So here is what I know the years of waiting took from you. They took relationships that should have been built. There were people you were supposed to grow alongside, connections that should have deepened over the years of your prime, partnerships that required a version of you who was present and available, and not consumed by the weight of an unfulfilled calling. And some of those connections did not wait. Some of those people moved on, not because they did not value you, but because you were not able to show up in the way that the relationship required while you were carrying everything you were carrying. And you watched them go, and you told yourself it was fine. And sometimes late at night, you know it was not entirely fine. The absence of those relationships is a real loss. It deserves to be named as such. They took years of momentum in the direction of your purpose. There are things you should have been building during the years of the waiting. Foundations you should have been laying. Skills that should have had a decade of practice behind them by now. A body of work that should have been accumulating. And instead, the years were spent in a kind of holding pattern, a circling, a sustained effort to maintain faith without visible progress, which took everything you had and left very little for the kind of forward movement that produces legacy. The gap between where you are and where you feel you should be is not imaginary. It is real. And the years that account for that gap were not wasted in a simple sense, but they were expensive. And the cost deserves to be acknowledged. They took the freedom to dream out loud. Because when you dream out loud and nothing happens, and then you dream out loud again and nothing happens again, at some point the self-protection instinct kicks in and you start keeping the big dreams internal. You stop telling people what you are believing for, because the look on their faces when it does not happen on your timeline is a secondary wound on top of the primary one. And so the dreams went underground. They did not disappear. They went into a quieter, more private place inside you, where they were safer, but also lonelier. And the loneliness of carrying a vision that you cannot share with the people around you is a specific, underrated kind of pain. You know exactly what I am talking about. And perhaps the most significant thing the years of waiting took from you is this: your easy, uncomplicated trust in yourself. The kind of confidence that does not have to be rebuilt every morning. The kind of self-belief that does not require daily maintenance because it is simply a settled fact, rather than an ongoing negotiation. At some point during the long season, you started to wonder if the vision was real or if you had invented it. You started to question whether the calling was genuine or whether it was a coping mechanism, a story you told yourself to give, the difficulty meaning it did not actually have. And that questioning was not weakness. It was the natural result of faith under sustained pressure. But it cost you something. It created a fracture in the foundation of how you see yourself, a hairline crack that you have been quietly living with and quietly working to repair. And the repair has been slow and imperfect and real. I am not going to rush past all of that to tell you it was worth it. Not yet, because you have heard that too. And it has sometimes landed like another way of dismissing what was real. Instead, I want to stay here for just a moment and say simply this: it happened. It cost you. The cost was real. And you are allowed to grieve it without that grief, meaning that you have lost faith, or that you are not grateful, or that you do not understand the larger purpose. You are allowed to hold both things at once. The grief of what was lost and the faith in what is coming. They are not contradictions. They are the full texture of a chosen one's journey, and anyone who tells you otherwise has not walked far enough in their own to know the difference. Now I want to bring someone into this conversation who walked a road that yours has echoed in ways you may not have recognized yet. His name is Joseph. And I want to be clear that I am not going to tell you his whole story today, because his whole story ends in a place that I want you to arrive at in your own time, in your own season, with the full weight of your own experience behind you. I am only going to tell you the middle part, because the middle part is where you live right now, and the middle part is the part that rarely gets spoken about with the honesty it deserves. Joseph was a young man who carried a vision inside him that was larger than his circumstances and larger than the understanding of the people closest to him. He had dreams, vivid and specific and undeniable, that pointed toward a future that bore no resemblance to his present situation. He told the people around him about what he had seen, and instead of being supported, he was resented for it. The very people who should have been his community became the source of his first wound. And the wound was deep enough to change the trajectory of everything that followed. He ended up in a pit, literally, physically, a pit in the ground, placed there by the hands of people he loved and trusted. And then he was sold, traded, moved from one difficult situation to another through no fault of his own, as a direct result of having dared to carry a vision that made other people uncomfortable. He found himself in a foreign country, in servitude with no visible connection between where he was standing and where the dream had pointed. He served faithfully and was falsely accused. He was imprisoned for something he did not do. He was forgotten by someone who promised to advocate for him and then went back to their own life without looking back. I am stopping there, because that is the middle. And the middle of Joseph's story looks, from inside it, exactly like abandonment, exactly like punishment, exactly like a vision that was either false from the beginning or has been somehow revoked by the very God who gave it. Every external piece of evidence in the middle of his story pointed toward the conclusion that the dream was not real, or that it was real, but it was not for him, or that he had done something to disqualify himself from the promise. None of that was true. But from inside the middle, from inside the pit and the prison and the foreign land and the forgotten promise, none of the future was visible, not even the edge of it, and yet he was not abandoned. He was not disqualified. He was not being punished for the audacity of his vision. He was being positioned for an assignment that required a man who had survived exactly what he had survived, who had maintained his integrity under exactly the pressure he had been placed under, who had developed in the darkness exactly the depth of character that the calling would require when it finally arrived in its fullness. The pit was not the end of his story, but I am not going to give you the ending today, because you are not at the ending today. You are in the middle, and the middle needs to be honored as its own sacred geography before you rush to get past it. What I will say is this: the fact that you are still here, still listening, still willing to receive a word in the middle of your middle, is itself a sign. Joseph did not give up in the pit. He did not give up in the prison. He did not give up in the years of obscurity that followed one difficult chapter with another, and neither did you. You have your own version of the pit, your own version of the prison, your own version of the long years between the vision and its fulfillment. And you are still here. You showed up today, which means you have not given up, which means the middle of your story is still being written, which means the chapter that vindicates everything, the chapter that makes sense of every closed door and every redirected plan and every year that felt like it was swallowed by silence, that chapter is still in front of you. The years took something real from you, and what is coming will honor every single thing they took, not by giving it all back in the same form, but by building something out of your survival that you could not have built any other way, and by opening doors that will require exactly the person the waiting made you into. You were not punished by the season. You were prepared by it, and the preparation is nearly complete. There is a word I want to give you today. Not a motivational phrase, not a general encouragement, not something designed to make you feel better for an hour and then evaporate by evening. A word with roots older than any language you and I currently speak. A word that comes from a tradition that understood time in a way that the modern world has almost entirely forgotten. And when you receive this word, when you actually let it land rather than simply hear it, I believe something inside you is going to shift in a way that changes not just how you feel about your past, but how you move through every single day that comes after this one. The ancient Greeks had two completely separate words for time. This is not a linguistic curiosity. It is a profound distinction that carries enormous practical weight for the life you are actually living right now. The first word was chronos. You have probably seen this word before, embedded in English words like chronological, chronicle, chronometer. Chronos is clock time. It is measurable, sequential, democratic in the sense that it moves at exactly the same pace for every person regardless of their circumstances, their calling, or their readiness. Chronos counts the minutes and the months and the years without any consideration for whether you are ready for what those minutes and months and years are carrying toward you. Chronos does not know you. Chronos does not care about you. Chronos simply moves indifferently forward. The second word was kairos, and kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not clock time. It is appointed time. It is the time of the right moment, the fullness of time, the season in which everything that has been accumulating finally converges into a single point of arrival. The ancient Greeks understood that not all moments are equal, that there are ordinary moments, which are simply chronos moving forward, and then there are kairos moments, which are specific, charged, irreplaceable points in time where something becomes possible that was not possible before and will not be possible again in exactly the same way. These moments are not created by human effort or human planning. They arrive, they open, and the only question is whether the person they arrive for is ready to step through them when they do. Here is why this matters for you right now. You have been measuring your life in chronos. You have been counting the years. You have been tracking the distance between where you are and where you feel you should be on a calendar that was designed for a different kind of journey than the one you are on. And every time the calendar advances without the visible confirmation you were hoping for, it registers as loss, as falling further behind, as evidence that something is wrong either with you, or with the plan, or with the God who gave you the vision in the first place. But here is what I need you to understand. And I need you to hear this not just with your mind, but with your whole body. Your life is not a chronos story. It has never been a chronos story. It has always, from the very beginning, been a kairos story. And kairos does not run on your calendar. It runs on an appointed sequence that was established before you were born, and that has been moving toward its moment of convergence with a precision that your clock cannot measure. This is not a comfort designed to excuse delay. This is a description of how appointed things actually work. The harvest does not arrive when the farmer is impatient for it. It arrives when the seed has completed its full cycle of development underground. And if you try to pull it up before that cycle is complete, what you get is not early fruit. What you get is a root system that has been torn before it was ready, and a plant that will struggle to produce what it was designed to produce. The waiting was not robbery. The waiting was the root system forming. And Kairos, your Kairos, arrives not when you have suffered enough, but when what is inside you has developed to the exact degree required to receive and sustain what is coming. Now I want to give you a second word. This one comes from Hebrew, from the ancient tradition that gave the world its most enduring understanding of promise and fulfillment. The word is kava. It appears in one of the most quoted lines about waiting and hope, often translated as those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. But the translation loses something critical. Because kava does not mean passive waiting. Kava does not mean sitting still and hoping. Kava means to twist together, to intertwine, to braid, to bind strands into something stronger than any single strand could be on its own. The image is not a person sitting quietly in a chair. The image is a rope maker. Someone who is actively, deliberately, repeatedly taking the individual strands of their experience, their faith, their loss, their perseverance, their grief, their hope, and winding them around each other with intention, creating something under tension that becomes, in the process of the twisting, extraordinarily strong. This is what you have been doing. Every year that felt like it was going nowhere, you were kava. You were twisting. You were taking the strands of what you believed and what you had lost, and what you refused to let go of, and braiding them together, under pressure, until they formed something that could hold the weight of what is coming. Because what is coming is heavy, not in a burdensome way, but in the way that significant things are heavy. The way that a calling fully arrived is heavier than a calling, only glimpsed from a distance. And the only thing that can hold it is a cord that has been twisted under a real tension over real time by real hands that refuse to let go. You are not behind. You have been braiding, and the braiding is nearly done. I want to go deeper into one more concept now, because I believe the combination of these ideas creates something that can permanently change the way you understand your own story. And this third concept is what ancient wisdom traditions called the wilderness season. It appears in almost every significant narrative of transformation across different cultures, different texts, different centuries. The wilderness season is the period of apparent isolation, apparent purposelessness, apparent lostness that precedes every great emergence. It is the desert before the promised land. It is the years in the foreign country before the palace. It is the prison before the position. It is the quiet before the announcement. The wilderness season has a set of characteristics that make it identifiable to anyone who has been inside one. The first characteristic is a loss of the familiar without the arrival of the new. You have left something behind, or something has been taken from you, but what is supposed to replace it has not yet appeared. You are in the between space, the corridor, and the corridor feels endless. The second characteristic is a stripping away of external validation. In the wilderness, there is no audience for your faith, no visible reward for your integrity, no confirmation from the world around you that the path you are on is real and that the destination exists. You are believing without evidence, which is the most demanding form of faith there is. The third characteristic is an acceleration of internal development that is invisible from the outside. From the outside, a person in the wilderness season looks like they are standing still. From the inside, everything is in motion. The character is being formed. The discernment is being sharpened. The patience is being built. The capacity is being expanded. None of this is visible until the emergence. But it is all happening. Here is what the wilderness season is not. It is not punishment. It has never been punishment. Every person who has ever been called to something significant has moved through a wilderness season, not because they failed at something, but because the assignment ahead required a preparation that could only happen in that specific environment. The wilderness strips away everything that is not essential, everything that would have been a distraction or a liability in the season ahead, everything that was keeping a person at a level they were not meant to stay at permanently. It is not comfortable, but it is purposeful. Every single day of it, the wilderness season you have been living through has been removing things from you that looked like losses, but were actually preparations. The relationships that ended were removing attachments that would have anchored you in a place you were not supposed to stay. The opportunities that did not work out were closing corridors that would have taken you in directions that could not lead to where you are actually going. The reduction of external validation was teaching you to move from a place of internal knowing rather than external approval, which is the only foundation strong enough to sustain what is coming. None of it was waste. All of it was preparation. And now I want to speak to what comes after the wilderness season, because every wilderness season has a boundary. It has an end. Not a gradual fading, but an actual threshold, an actual moment where the door of the new season appears and the invitation is extended, and the person who has been formed by the wilderness is asked to step through. In the language of Kairos, this is the appointed moment. This is the intersection of preparation and promise. This is the point at which all the twisting, all the braiding, all the kava of the long years produces the cord that is strong enough to carry the weight of the open door. The question is not whether this moment exists for you. It does. The question is whether you will recognize it when it arrives. Because here is what I have seen in the lives of people who have been through long-sing seasons of preparation. When the door finally opens, it does not always look like they expected it to look. It does not always come through the channels they were watching. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the middle of an ordinary week, through a conversation they almost did not have, through a link they almost did not click, through a message they almost scrolled past. And the ones who walk through it are not the ones who had the most faith in the loudest moments. They are the ones who kept their awareness open even when they were tired, who kept showing up even when the showing up felt pointless, who kept their spirit tuned to receive even when nothing had arrived for what felt like a very long time. Your awareness is open right now. You kept showing up. You are here, which means you have not closed your spirit to what might be coming through a door that does not look exactly like you imagined. And that openness, that faithful, tired, persevering openness is itself a Kairos quality. It is itself evidence that you are the kind of person the appointed moment has been waiting to meet. You are not delayed. You are not disqualified. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are at the end of a wilderness season that was always meant to be temporary. You are holding a cord that was braided under years of real tension and is now strong enough to hold the weight of an open door. You are standing at the intersection of Chronos and Kairos, where the clock time that counted your years of waiting meets the appointed time that says the waiting is complete. The wilderness season does not end slowly. It ends the way dawn ends the night. Not gradually, not incrementally, but with the kind of light that makes you wonder how the darkness could have seemed so total only moments before. You were not delayed. You were being assembled, and the assembly is complete. There is a specific kind of knowing that arrives not in the mind, but somewhere lower, somewhere in the chest or the gut or the place behind the sternum, where certainty lives, when it is real rather than manufactured. You have felt it before. Not often, but enough times that you recognize it when it comes. It is the feeling that something is about to change, not in a vague, hopeful way, in a specific, directional way, like the air before a storm, when everything goes quiet and the atmosphere shifts and your body knows before your mind has caught up that something is incoming. You are feeling that right now. I know you are, because that feeling is not random, and it is not your imagination. It is your spirit registering the proximity of what has been moving toward you in the invisible realm, and it is beginning to break through into the sensory world where you can actually perceive it. I want to speak to 3 specific areas of your life today, not in general terms, not in abstract spiritual language, but in the concrete, practical, lived-in language of the actual life you are actually living. Because the shift that is coming is not a shift in how you feel about your circumstances. It is a shift in the circumstances themselves. And I want to name what that looks like in the specific territories where chosen ones most often experience their breakthroughs, so that when it begins, you recognize it for what it is and you do not talk yourself out of it, or minimize it, or explain it away before it has fully arrived. The first territory is your internal world, the landscape of what happens inside you when no one is watching and nothing external is rewarding your faith. Because before anything changes on the outside, something has already changed on the inside, and the change on the inside is not subtle. It is not a slight improvement in mood or a temporary boost in motivation. What is coming in your internal world is a settling, a deep, structural settling of something that has been restless and unresolved, and quietly destabilizing for longer than you can probably remember. The anxiety that has been your background frequency, the low hum of not enough and not yet, and what if it never happens, is going to begin to quiet. Not all at once, and not permanently after a single day, but progressively and noticeably, and in a way that will be visible to people around you before you even mention it yourself. What you are going to feel as this settling arrives is a strange combination of peace and alertness, not the drowsy, numbed-out peace of someone who has stopped caring, but the clear, awake peace of someone who has finally stopped fighting their own timing and surrendered to a wisdom larger than their own management of events. You are going to find yourself less reactive to things that used to derail you for hours. You are going to find yourself recovering faster from disappointments that used to knock you sideways for days. You are going to find yourself waking up some mornings with an energy that does not have an obvious source, a readiness that feels like it arrived from the outside rather than being generated by you from the inside. This is not wishful thinking. This is the neurological and spiritual result of a brain and a spirit that have been through the preparation they were designed to go through and are now beginning to operate at the frequency they were designed to operate at. What you should not do during this phase of internal shifting is try to explain it to people who are not ready to hear it. Not because the experience is not real, but because the articulation of an internal shift to someone who has not lived through the preparation that produced it often lands poorly and creates a secondary experience of misunderstanding that you do not need right now. Let the change in you be visible before you make it verbal. Let people see it in your face and your posture and the quality of your presence before you hand them a theological or scientific framework for understanding it. The proof will be more persuasive than the explanation, and you will save yourself from the specific kind of discouragement that comes from offering something precious to someone who cannot yet receive it. What you can trust in this first territory is that the peace is real, It is not fragile. It is not going to evaporate the first time a hard thing happens, because the peace that comes at the end of a wilderness season is not the peace of circumstances having resolved. It is the peace of a person who has been through enough to know, at a level deeper than thoughts, that they are held, that the plan is real, that the appointed time is not subject to cancellation. That kind of peace is structural. It does not depend on the weather of your circumstances to maintain its temperature. The second territory where things are about to shift is your relational world. And this one I want to speak to carefully, because the relational shifts that accompany a season change are often the most disorienting to navigate, not because they are bad, but because they can feel like loss even when they are actually alignment. Here is what is going to happen. Some people in your current circle are going to begin to create distance, not dramatically, not with conflict or confrontation in most cases, but with a quiet withdrawal that you will notice over weeks rather than days. They will be less available. Conversations will feel more effortful. The connection that used to be easy will require more energy than it produces. And your instinct, because you are someone who values loyalty and does not abandon people lightly, will be to try harder, to reach further, to maintain the connection through additional effort. I want to gently ask you to resist that instinct in this particular season, because the distance is not always a wound that needs to be healed. Sometimes the distance is an alignment that needs to be honored. Some people were assigned to a specific season of your life and not to the whole of it. And trying to carry them into the next season is not loyalty. It is a misunderstanding of the assignment. At the same time, and often around the same period, new people are going to begin appearing. Not always loudly, not always in the way you expected the right people to show up. But you will notice them. A conversation that goes unusually deep for how recently you met. A person whose language sounds like a translation of your own internal vocabulary. Someone who, within minutes of meeting, seems to already understand something about you that took years to explain to people you have known for decades. Pay attention to these people. Do not be so protective of your interior world that you fail to recognize the companions that the new season has sent ahead to walk alongside you through it. Not every new connection is trustworthy. Use discernment, but do not use past wounds as a reason to close your spirit to the people who were sent specifically to help you carry what is coming. What you should not do in this relational territory is force the old to coexist with the new before both are ready. There is a temptation to try to bring everyone along, to have both the relationships that are completing their assignment and the relationships that are just beginning in the same room at the same time, and to manage the tension between them through your own energy. That is not your job in this season. Your job is to be present and open and discerning, and to allow the natural movement of relationships to do what it needs to do without gripping or forcing or managing it to death. The right people will stay without being held. The wrong ones will leave without being pushed. And the new ones will arrive without being summoned. Trust the movement. The third territory where things are about to shift is the one that people in the middle of a long waiting season perhaps most need to hear about. It is the territory of resources and opportunity. And I want to be specific about how this shift tends to arrive, because it often does not look like what people imagine it will look like when they have been praying and believing for provision. It rarely arrives as a single large event that solves everything in one moment. More often, it arrives as a sequence of small openings that, taken individually, seem modest, but that, followed faithfully, leads somewhere that one large event could not have taken you. A conversation that mentions a name you should reach out to. An idea that surfaces during your 7 minutes of stillness that solves a problem you had been circling for months. A door that opens in an industry or an area that was not on your radar, but that when you walk through it turns out to lead exactly where you were trying to go through the front entrance. The provision comes through the side door. The opportunity arrives through a relationship that does not look like an opportunity relationship. The resource appears in a form you did not recognize as the thing you had been praying for until you were already holding it. What you should not do in this territory is hold so tightly to the specific form you expected the provision to take that you miss the actual provision when it arrives in a different shape. The person who is believing for a particular kind of job should not be so focused on that specific job title that they walk past the conversation that leads to something better. The person who is believing for a particular financial breakthrough should not be so fixated on a specific source that they dismiss the smaller opening that, followed faithfully, leads to the larger one. Chosen ones in their breakthrough season are required to hold their expectations with open hands, specific enough to recognize the right thing when it comes, but flexible enough not to reject it because it arrived differently than anticipated. What you trust in this third territory is that what is yours will find you. I do not say that as a passive invitation to do nothing. The 3-step return, the 7 minutes of practice, the daily act of positioning yourself in the frequency of what you were created for, these are active. These are participatory, but they are active in the way that a sail is active, not pushing against the wind but positioned to receive it. And when the wind comes, and it is already coming, the sail that is properly positioned moves with a power that no amount of rowing could have generated. 3 territories, 3 directions in them can change. Internal settling, relational realignment, resourceful opening. They are not arriving separately in neat sequential order. They are arriving simultaneously, overlapping, reinforcing each other. And the whole of it together constitutes what I believe, with everything in me, is the beginning of your breakthrough season. Type the words "I received this" in the comments right now if your spirit has said yes to even one of those 3 territories. Not because the typing makes it happen, because declaration is the chosen one's way of marking the moment, of saying out loud in whatever form, I see what is moving and I am not turning away from it. I am leaning in. Like this message if it named something you have not heard named before. Share it with someone who is in the middle of their own waiting, who needs to hear that the 3 things they have been holding on to are already beginning to move. Subscribe so that the next word that belongs to you arrives before the moment it is needed. And if this community has given you something real in your season of preparation, consider supporting it so that the message can reach the next chosen one who is sitting exactly where you were sitting when you first found this place. The shift is not coming. The shift has already begun. You are simply becoming awake enough to feel it. Something was just named in you. I know it because I know what it feels like when a word lands in the right place, when a description of what is coming touches something in a person that has been waiting to be touched for longer than they can easily measure. The 3 territories we just walked through together, the internal settling, the relational realignment, the resourceful opening, those were not abstract promises. Those were a map. And if your spirit recognized the terrain, it is because you are already standing in the early edges of it, even if your eyes have not fully adjusted to see it yet. So, before I say anything new, I want to take what you just received and press it a little deeper, because the knowing is only the beginning. What comes next is the becoming. And the becoming requires a name. Not a name given to you by the circumstances you came from. Not the name that the years of waiting assigned to you in moments of doubt or discouragement. Not the name that the people who did not understand your season called you when they were trying to make sense of why things had not moved the way everyone expected them to move. I want to give you a name that comes from the other side of everything you have been through. A name that is not a reward for surviving, but a description of what surviving produced. A name that belongs to the version of you that is standing right now at the threshold of a new season, carrying everything the wilderness gave you, ready in a way that could not have been manufactured by any shortcut. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a pattern breaker. I want to tell you what that means, because it is not simply a title, and it is not an achievement to add to a list. It is a description of a specific kind of calling that carries both a weight and an honor that most people in your life may not fully understand for some time. A pattern breaker is someone who, by the nature of what they have survived and what they have refused to pass on, has permanently altered the trajectory of something larger than themselves. Patterns, in the sense I am using the word, are inherited grooves of behavior, belief, limitation, and expectation that move through families, through communities, through generations, quietly and powerfully, shaping what people believe is possible for someone like them. Most people do not break these patterns because most people do not even see them. They live inside them the way a fish lives inside water, without awareness that the water exists as a separate thing from themselves. But you saw it, maybe not all at once, and maybe not always clearly, but at some point in your journey you became aware that you were living inside a groove that had been laid down before you arrived. And you made a decision, conscious or not, that you were not going to pass it forward in the same form you received it. That decision, made in the middle of a season that gave you every reason to simply comply with what had always been, is not a small thing. It is generational. It is the kind of decision that people who come after you, people who may never know your name or your story, will live in the expanded space of. Because when a pattern breaker does their work, the people who come behind them inherit a wider corridor to walk in. The ceiling that limited one generation becomes the floor of the next, and the person who broke the pattern may never fully see the extent of what their breaking made possible. But the breaking was real, and it mattered at a scale that extends far beyond what any individual life can contain. You are a pattern breaker, and the season that is opening is the season in which that identity begins to be visible, not just to you in your private knowing, but to the world around you that has been watching, some with skepticism and some with secret hope, to see whether the thing you believed would actually materialize. I want to give you something to do with this identity. Not a task, but a practice of the imagination, because the imagination is where the chosen ones do some of their most significant work before the physical world has caught up with what is already true in the spiritual one. I want you to picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical threshold, but a specific one, a doorway with everything you have lived through behind you and everything that is coming in front of you. Take a moment with that image. Let it be real in your mind. Feel the ground under your feet. Notice the quality of the light. You are standing exactly at the line between what was and what is. Now, I want you to turn, slowly, and look back at what is behind you. Not to dwell there, not to return to it, but to see it clearly for the first time from this vantage point. You can see the years of the waiting spread out behind you like a landscape. The long seasons of not yet, the nights that were harder than anyone saw, The relationships that ended when you needed them to stay. The doors that closed when you had been counting on them to open. The mornings when the faith was thin and the doubt was loud and you kept going anyway. From here, standing at the threshold, you can see all of it at once, not as a series of losses, but as the path that led you to exactly this point. Every single element of it was necessary for the route. Not comfortable, not fair in every case, but necessary. The path only makes sense when you can see the whole of it, and from this vantage point, you can. Now turn back forward and look at what is in front of you. This is harder to see clearly because it is not yet fully formed in the visible world, but your spirit can see the shape of it, the territory that belongs to this next season. The people who are already moving toward you from the other side of the threshold. The work that has been waiting for the version of you that only the wilderness could have produced. The doors that are not just unlocked, but open, standing open, and have been standing open since the moment your preparation reached its completion. The life that has your name on it in a way that nothing else ever could, because it was designed specifically for the person you became through everything you have been through. You are not looking at that future from a distance. You are standing at the edge of it. The threshold is not miles away. It is directly under your feet. And the step that takes you through it is not a leap into the unknown. It is a step into what has already been prepared for you by a wisdom that knew what you would need before you knew that you needed it. Now I want to speak something over you. Not in a performative way. In the way that words, spoken with intention and with love, carry something real into the atmosphere of a person's life and do not simply evaporate when the sound stops. These are not my words reaching you. They are a transmission from a love that has known your name since before the world had a language to speak it in. You who have carried the vision in the dark, who have kept the flame alive in seasons when no one was adding fuel and the wind was working against it. You are seen, not seen as you appear on the surface, in the exhaustion and the uncertainty and the quiet bravery of the continuing. Seen as you are in your fullness, in the complete picture of what you were made to carry and what you have been formed to become. You who have grieved what the years took from you and chosen not to become bitter about it, you are honored. The grief was not weakness. The grief was evidence that you were made for something real enough to be painful in its absence. And the choosing, every time you chose to release the bitterness and hold on to the hope, was a form of courage that will not go unacknowledged. You who have doubted, who have had seasons where the faith was 90% doubt and 10% holding on, you are not disqualified. You are precisely the kind of person that the appointed time is designed for, because the faith that survives doubt is not smaller than the faith that never doubted. It is stronger. It has been tested. It knows what it is made of in a way that untested faith does not, and what is coming requires the tested kind. You who have felt unseen, unacknowledged, passed over, and overlooked by the people and the systems and the timelines that were supposed to see you and confirm you, I want you to hear this. The confirmation that is coming is not going to trickle in quietly. It is going to arrive in a way that retroactively makes sense of everything that preceded it. The people who doubted you are going to witness something they did not anticipate. Not because your breakthrough is about them, but because the light that belongs to a chosen one who has finally stepped into their full expression is not a light that can be hidden or minimized. It illuminates everything around it, and the illumination will speak for itself without you having to say a single word. To the pattern breaker standing at the threshold today, I want to give you these specific words to carry into the week ahead. You are not starting over. You are stepping forward into what was always yours. You are not recovering from what the waiting took. You are building with what the waiting gave. You are not trying to prove something to the people who doubted you. You are simply walking through a door that was made for you, and the walking through is its own testimony. May the peace that settled in you during this message deepen rather than dissipate as the week unfolds. May the clarity that came through the naming find its way into your decisions and your conversations, and the way you see the opportunities that are beginning to surface around you. May the identity of pattern breaker take root in you, not as a pride, but as a responsibility. The beautiful, weighty, honored responsibility of someone who breaks what was broken for the sake of those who come after. And may the threshold that is under your feet right now be exactly as close as it feels. Because it is. You are already inside your breakthrough. You just needed someone to name it for you, so you could stop waiting for permission to believe it. You are a pattern breaker. The pattern ends with you, and what begins with you is something that will outlast everything the waiting tried to take. There is a question that arises in the spirit of every chosen one who has received what you have received in this conversation today. Not a question of doubt, not a question of whether any of this is real, but a practical, grounded, essential question that deserves a practical, grounded, essential answer. The question is simply this: what do I do now? Not in a year from now when circumstances have shifted, not in a month from now when the evidence has accumulated. Right now, today, in the life I am actually living, with the limitations I am actually navigating, and the resources I currently have, and the people who are currently around me. What is the action that belongs to this moment? I want to honor that question with the specificity it deserves, because chosen ones in their breakthrough season do not need more inspiration. They need instruction. They need something concrete to do with the fire that has been lit inside them during this conversation, something that directs the energy rather than simply generating more of it without a channel to move through. So I am going to give you 3 specific, practical, immediately actionable things. One for each of the territories we identified in the last section. One for the internal world, one for the relational world, and one for the territory of resources and opportunity. These are not suggestions. These are assignments, and they are sized for the life you are living right now, not the life you are moving toward, because the actions of the now are what build the bridge to the then. The first assignment of your internal world, and it is an extension of the 3-step return we introduced earlier, but with a specific addition that belongs to this particular phase of your journey. Each morning this week, before you reach for your phone, before you check any notification, before the day gets its voice into your atmosphere, I want you to do something that takes less than 60 seconds but carries a weight that will shape everything that follows it. I want you to place one hand on your chest, directly over your heart, and say these words out loud. I am a pattern breaker. What ended with me was too heavy for anyone to carry forward. What begins with me was worth every year of the preparation. I am not behind. I am exactly where I was always meant to be on this day. Say it even if it feels awkward. Say it even if your voice is quiet and uncertain. Say it especially on the mornings when the gap between those words and your visible reality feels the widest, because those are the mornings when the declaration does the most structural work in the spirit. The point is not to manufacture a feeling of confidence. The point is to speak truth into your own atmosphere before the atmosphere of the world around you has a chance to speak its version of reality first. You are establishing the frequency of your day in the first 60 seconds of it. And what you establish in those 60 seconds sets the tone for what you notice, what you attract, and how you respond to everything that follows. After the declaration, move into the 3 steps. The gratitude inversion, naming one specific thing you are grateful did not happen. The declaration of positioning, speaking to your timeline in the language of appointed time. And then the 7 minutes of silence, which by now you understand is not empty time, but the most productive 7 minutes of your day. The time in which your brain settles into the frequency where clarity and creativity and guidance become accessible. Do this every day, this week, without exception. 7 consecutive days. Not because the practice needs exactly 7 days to begin working, but because 7 consecutive days of a new practice is what it takes to establish it as a rhythm rather than an event. And what is coming in your life requires rhythms, not events. The second assignment is for your relational world, and it is perhaps the most immediately challenging of the 3 because it requires you to do something that runs counter to the instincts that the long season of isolation may have built into you. I want you to identify one person in your current life who you believe is also in a season of waiting. A person who is carrying something significant and doing so largely without acknowledgement or companionship. Not someone who needs you to fix their situation or solve their problems. Just someone who needs to have what they are carrying named by another human being who sees it. And I want you to reach out to them this week, not with advice, not with a plan, not with a referral to a product or a program, or a 5-step system, just with a message or a conversation that says, in your own words, something that amounts to this: I see you. What you are carrying is real. You are not behind, you are positioned, and I am in this with you. Here is why this assignment matters in ways that go beyond the obvious. When a chosen one in their breakthrough season reaches toward another person who is still in the middle of their wilderness, 2 things happen simultaneously. The person being reached toward receives the gift of being seen, which is one of the most powerful things one human being can give another. But the person doing the reaching receives something equally significant. They receive the confirmation, felt rather than reasoned, that what they have been through has produced something transferable. Something that can be given away without being diminished. And that confirmation, the felt knowledge that your survival has value to someone beyond yourself, is one of the things that most powerfully consolidates the identity of a pattern breaker and makes it real in the body rather than just real in the mind. Do not reach toward a large group. Do not make a public post. Find one person. Be specific. Be personal, be present. That is the relational assignment for this week. The third assignment is for the territory of resources and opportunity. And it is the most counterintuitive of the 3, which is why I want to explain the reasoning behind it before I give you the instruction. In a season of transition, when things are beginning to move and new doors are beginning to open, the natural impulse is to move quickly, to maximize, to accelerate, to make up for lost time by pursuing multiple opportunities simultaneously and moving as fast as possible through every opening that appears. I want to ask you gently and specifically not to do that in this particular window of time. What I want you to do instead is identify the single most important thing, the one action, the one conversation, the one step that if taken this week would move the needle in the most significant direction for where you are actually trying to go. Not the most impressive action. Not the action that would look best to the people around you. The most important one, as defined by the destination you are called toward. And I want you to give that one thing the best of your attention, the best of your energy, the best of your time this week. Not after everything else. First, before the urgent things crowd out the important one. Before the day gets loud and the demands multiply, and the best of you has already been given away to things that were pressing but not primary. This is the discipline of the chosen one in their breakthrough season. Not doing everything that is possible, doing the thing that is essential. Because what is coming requires your concentration more than it requires your busyness. It requires your depth more than it requires your volume. And the person who moves into a new season, having mastered the practice of identifying and protecting the most important thing, is the person who does not get overwhelmed when the doors begin to open rapidly and the opportunities begin to multiply and the decisions become more consequential than they have ever been before. One declaration every morning. One act of relational generosity this week. One prioritized essential action given your best energy. These three things, practiced together, are the bridge between what you received in this conversation and what you are going to live in the weeks and months ahead. Now I want to speak to something that I know is present in some of you as we approach the end of this time together. A quiet anxiety about whether you are going to be able to sustain this. Whether the shift you felt during this conversation is going to hold when you return to the ordinary texture of your daily life. Whether the breakthrough that was named here is actually going to materialize in the tangible, visible, undeniable way that you need it to materialize. I want to speak to that anxiety directly, not to dismiss it, but to reframe it. The anxiety is not evidence that the breakthrough is not real. It is evidence that it matters. We do not feel anxious about things that do not matter to us. The anxiety is the pressure of caring deeply about something significant, and caring deeply is not a problem. It is a sign of aliveness. But I want to offer you something to do with the anxiety that is more useful than either suppressing it or surrendering to it. I want you to let the anxiety be a reminder to return to the practice. Every time the anxiety rises, every time the doubt gets loud, every time the gap between the promise and the visible evidence feels like it is widening rather than closing, return to step 1, step 2, and step 3. Return to the declaration. Return to the 7 minutes. Return to the practice that is building day by day and layer by layer, the internal infrastructure that will sustain what is coming. Because here is the thing about breakthrough seasons that nobody tells you clearly enough. The breakthrough is not a single moment, after which everything is permanently different and nothing is ever hard again. The breakthrough is an opening, a threshold crossing, a passage from one season into the next, and the next season has its own demands, its own required growth, its own places where practice and faithfulness and the willingness to keep showing up are what make the difference between someone who passed through an open door and someone who built a life in the territory on the other side of it. You are not being prepared for a moment. You are being prepared for a life, and the life that is waiting for you on the other side of this threshold is one that was designed with the full range of your capacity in mind, not the diminished, exhausted, self-doubting version of you that the long season sometimes produced, but the full version, the pattern breaker version, the person who survived what you survived and came out of it with something to give rather than something to prove. That person is who you are, right now, today. Not after the breakthrough is fully visible, not after the circumstances have shifted to confirm what you have been believing. Right now, in this moment, you are already that person. You are already standing on the other side of the threshold, even if your eyes have not yet adjusted to the new light. The action belongs to today. The practice belongs to today. The identity belongs to today. And today, faithfully lived, is the whole of what is required to step into the tomorrow that has been prepared for you. We have traveled a long way together in this conversation, not in distance, but in depth. We have gone down into places that most public conversations never reach, into the grief of what the years took, into the science of what the brain is capable of when it is given the right conditions, into the ancient language of appointed time and sacred waiting, into the specific territories where the shift is already beginning to move. We have named things that needed naming. We have sat with things that needed sitting with before they could be released. And now we are here, at the end of this particular stretch of road, and I want to use this final section, not to introduce anything new, but to press the seal on everything that has already been given. To make sure that what you received today does not simply evaporate when you close this video and return to the ordinary world. To send you out of this conversation as someone who was genuinely changed by it, not just moved by it. So let me begin here with gratitude. Real gratitude, not the performative kind, not the gratitude of a host wrapping up a program, but the specific, personal gratitude of someone who knows what it costs to show up to something like this. Because you did not have to be here today. You made a choice, in the middle of whatever your day looked like, to stop and to listen and to be present to a message that required something of you beyond passive reception. It required you to feel things, required you to remember things. It required you to be honest with yourself about where you are and what you have been carrying and what you are hoping for and how tired you sometimes are of hoping for it. That kind of showing up is not nothing. It is an act of courage that deserves to be honored rather than simply acknowledged. And I want to tell you something about the specific kind of courage it represents. There is a type of person who, even in the middle of their own wilderness, even in the middle of their own unanswered questions, still makes the choice to remain open, still makes the choice to lean toward a word that might speak to what they are carrying. Still shows up, even when showing up feels almost pointless because they have shown up before and nothing seemed to change. And then they show up again, and again, and again. You are that kind of person, the kind who keeps showing up. And I want you to understand that that quality, that persistent, faithful, sometimes barely hanging on willingness to remain open, is one of the rarest and most significant qualities a human being can carry. It is the quality that makes breakthrough possible when it arrives, because the breakthrough does not land on people who have closed themselves off to it in self-protection. It lands on people who, against all the evidence of their circumstances, remained open. You remained open, and today that openness received something. Now, I want to give you a final practice before we close, not a new one, a completion of something we have already begun. Earlier in this conversation, I invited you to picture yourself standing at a threshold, looking back at everything you have come through and looking forward at what is ahead. I want to return to that image one more time, but with a specific addition that I believe will change how you carry it with you after this conversation ends. I want you to picture everything you have been carrying, not abstractly, but specifically. The unanswered questions, the grief of the years, the self-doubt that was produced by the long season, the disappointments that left marks, the relationships that ended before you were ready, the version of your future that you had to set down when it did not arrive on your timeline. I want you to picture all of that gathered together, the way you might gather up belongings before a long journey, held in your arms. Feel the weight of it, because it has been heavy, and you have carried it faithfully and for a long time. And now I want you to picture yourself setting it down, not throwing it away, not denying that it was real, not pretending that it did not happen or did not matter, just setting it down, placing it at the threshold, at the line between the old season and the new one, leaving it there, not because it was worthless, but because it has completed its purpose. The weight of it shaped you, the carrying of it formed you. And now the same love that gave you the weight to carry is asking you to set it down so that your hands are free for what is coming. Because what is coming requires open hands. It requires a lightness that you have not been able to carry while you were holding everything else. And the setting down is not loss. It is liberation. Set it down. Leave it at the threshold and walk through with your hands open and your face forward and the full identity of who the wilderness made you, which is more than you knew you were when you entered it, and more than enough for everything that the new season requires. All across the world, right now, other chosen ones are sitting with this same message in different time zones, in different languages, in different circumstances, but in the same season of becoming. They have walked the same corridor you walked. They have carried the same questions you carried. They have kept their faith alive in the same darkness you kept yours alive in. And they are arriving alongside you at the same threshold. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. The wilderness felt solitary because wilderness seasons are designed to feel that way. But the truth is that you were accompanied the entire time by a presence too large to be contained in the ordinary visible world, and by a community of other chosen ones who were in their own parallel journeys without knowing yours. And the arrival of all of you together at this convergence point is not a coincidence. It is a coordinated movement. Heaven does not do things accidentally. Every person who needed to receive this word today was brought here by the same invisible thread. And the thread did not bring you here to leave you unchanged. I want to speak to the people in your life who doubted you, not in anger, not in vindication, because neither of those is the posture of a pattern breaker in their breakthrough season. But I want to acknowledge the specific offer that is about to be extended to the people who told you it would not work, who told you the vision was too large, who told you that the waiting was a sign that it was not meant to happen, who told you to be more realistic, to settle, to stop believing for something that was taking so long to arrive. The offer that is being extended to them is not judgment. It is the testimony of your life. They are about to witness something that will require them to revise their understanding of what is possible for someone like you. And that revision is a gift. Not a gift you owe them. A gift that your breakthrough naturally produces in the people around it. The light does not ask permission to illuminate. It simply illuminates. And what is coming in your life is going to illuminate things in the people around you that their own doubt had obscured. If, somewhere in this conversation, the genius wave met you, if the science of brainwave entrainment landed alongside everything else, and something in you said yes to that specific tool as part of your preparation for what is coming, then it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. Not as a requirement, not as the only path, but as one more piece of what was made available to you today. If it is a yes for you, you will know. And if you know, the link is there. Now I want to ask something of you before you leave. Not for me. For the chosen one who is sitting in a car somewhere right now, parked outside their house because they are not ready to go inside yet, who has not heard anyone name what they are carrying in the way that it needs to be named. For the chosen one who is lying on a bedroom floor staring at the ceiling, wondering if the dream was real or if they invented it. For the chosen one who is watching their Monday approach like a wall and does not have anyone to tell them that the wall is actually a door. If this message reached you in a real way today, share it. Like it so that the signal travels further. Subscribe so that the next word that belongs to you does not go to someone else by default. And if you feel moved to support this work financially, so that it can reach more of the people it was made for. That generosity is an act of love that extends far beyond your own screen and your own season. You would be sending a lifeline to someone you will never meet, whose name you will never know, whose breakthrough your act of generosity helped make possible. That is pattern breaker behavior. That is what it looks like to break cycles even in the small, practical acts of a single Tuesday. I am not saying goodbye to you today. I am saying go. Go with what was given here. Go with the identity that was named. Go with the practice that was handed to you. Go with the map of the 3 territories and the specific assignments and the knowledge that your threshold is not in the distance, but directly under your feet. Go with the settled, unshakable knowing that the offer your breakthrough is about to extend to the world is one that will shock everyone who wrote off the vision. Everyone who doubted the timeline. Everyone who told you to lower the ceiling on what you were believing for. They are about to be shocked. Not because you need that, but because it is the natural consequence of a chosen one walking fully into what was always theirs. Go. The door is open, and it has been waiting for exactly you.